The recycled air hung heavy and metallic in Dr. Ares Thorne's cramped lab aboard the generation ship Hope. 47 years. 47 years since the launch, a desperate gamble that had flung humanity into the inky black, a fragile ark carrying the seed of civilization across the unfathomable gulf of interstellar space. Outside, the muted hum of the ship's life support systems was the constant, low thrum of their precarious existence, a lullaby of survival. The flickering fluorescent lights cast long, skeletal shadows across Ares's weary face, highlighting the deep lines etched by years of relentless work and the gnawing anxiety that had become his constant companion. He stared at the datapad, its screen displaying a chaotic mess of fragmented data, a garbled distress signal, weak and fading. It originated from Kepler's 186F, a colony established decades ago on the very edge of explored space, a world humanity had fought tooth and nail to claim. The signal was wrong. Terribly wrong. A sharp, metallic tang of fear tightened in Ares's chest. He felt it in the pit of his stomach, a cold dread that was as familiar as the recycled air. It wasn't the technical glitches that worried him, he'd seen those before. It was the silence woven into the static, the absence of coherent pleas for help. It screamed of something far more sinister. A sigh, ragged and weary, escaped his lips. He rubbed his eyes, his gaze falling on a faded photograph tucked into a corner of his datapad, a smiling young woman with bright eyes and a cascade of auburn hair, his late wife, Ilara. The guilt pricked at him, sharp and insistent, a constant reminder of the life she'd sacrificed so he could pursue his research, this desperate search for a future that might never come. A sudden tap on the door startled him. Dr. Lena Petrova, his second-in-command, stood in the doorway, her usually vibrant face drawn and pale. Her dark eyes, normally sparkling with sharp intelligence, were clouded with an apprehension that mirrored his own. Another one, Ares? Her voice was a hushed whisper, barely audible above the ship's steady hum. Ares nodded, his throat tight. Kepler's 186F. The signal, it's fragmented. Distorted. They're not responding to standard protocols. Lena frowned, her brow furrowing in worry. This is becoming more frequent, Ares. These anomalies. She gestured towards the main view screen, a vast, inky canvas punctuated only by the distant gleam of the dying neutron star that served as their celestial anchor, their only beacon in the absolute void. What if it's not anomalies at all? A shiver ran down Ares's spine. He knew what she meant. The unspoken fear that clung to the crew like a shroud. The fear of the unknown, the fear that something else was out there, something far more terrifying than the challenges they'd already faced. I'm going to run another analysis, Ares said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. He needed to maintain control, for his sake and for the sake of the hundreds of lives that depended on him. Maybe we can find a pattern. But deep down, a cold knot of certainty settled in his gut. This wasn't just another anomaly. This was something bigger. Something far more devastating than they could possibly imagine. The enhanced analysis took hours, a grueling process of sifting through the fragmented distress signal from Kepler's 186F. Ares worked alongside Lena, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of the datapads, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic clicking of keys and the occasional frustrated sigh. The air in the lab grew thick with tension, a palpable anxiety hanging in the space between them. The initial sense of unease had morphed into something far more concrete, a chilling certainty that had settled over them like a shroud. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a pattern emerged from the digital chaos. It wasn't a pattern of human distress, but something far more alien, far more terrifying. A series of rhythmic pulses, like a heartbeat, but infinitely more complex, interwoven with strange energy signatures that defied anything Ares had ever encountered. He stared at the waveforms, his breath catching in his throat. They weren't just signals, they were a symphony of destruction, a chilling, almost musical prelude to annihilation. What is it? Lena asked, her voice barely a breath, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that matched his own. Ares swallowed, his voice thick with dread. It's not human, Lena. It's something else. Something consuming. He brought up a series of visual reconstructions based on the energy signatures. The images were fragmented, blurry, yet terrifyingly clear. They showed vast, amorphous shapes, black as the void itself, engulfing planets, leaving behind nothing but desolate wastelands. The shapes seemed to shift and writhe, a nightmarish dance of destruction. They were like a swarm of biomechanical entities, moving with a terrifying synergy, consuming everything in their path. "It's organic," Lena whispered, her face pale, but advanced. "Beyond anything we've ever seen." Ares nodded grimly. "The Obsidian Tide," he murmured, the name a chilling echo of the whispered rumors that had circulated for years on the fringes of the scientific community, rumors dismissed as fringe theories. Now, those rumors had become terrifying reality. The Obsidian Tide was real, and it was at their doorstep. A wave of nausea washed over Lena. "This isn't just a colony attack, Ares. This is galactic." Ares felt the cold grip of despair constricting his chest. The sheer scale of the threat, the utter annihilation of worlds, was overwhelming. Kepler's 186F wasn't just destroyed, it was consumed. There was no hope of rescue, no trace of survivors. The Obsidian Tide hadn't just attacked, it had eradicated. The gravity of their situation crashed down on them, the weight of it nearly unbearable. This wasn't a simple rescue mission. This was a fight for survival, not just for the Hope, but for the entire human race. And based on the evidence before them, they were fighting a losing battle. A profound silence descended upon the lab, heavier and more oppressive than the recycled air, broken only by the silent, relentless ticking of the clock, each second a nail hammered into the coffin of their hopes. The symphony of destruction had begun, and humanity was playing a desperate, discordant counterpoint. The news of the Obsidian Tide's advance spread through the Hope like wildfire, igniting a maelstrom of fear and desperate debate. Ares found himself at the center of a raging storm, caught between the grim reality of the situation and the conflicting opinions of the crew. The ship's bridge, usually a scene of calm efficiency, was now a chaotic mix of hushed whispers, frantic discussions, and strained faces. Admiral Hayes, a grizzled veteran with a steely gaze and an even steelier resolve, dominated the central console. His voice, usually calm and authoritative, was edged with a barely contained fury. "We launch a counter-offensive. We hit them hard, before they reach us." Ares felt a cold dread wash over him. Hayes' plan was a suicidal gamble. Their weaponry, designed for planetary defense and resource extraction, was hopelessly outmatched by the Obsidian Tide's terrifying power. A direct confrontation would mean certain annihilation. "Admiral," Ares said, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the cacophony, "with all due respect, a direct attack is suicide. We don't understand their technology, their biology. We need to know how they operate, where their weaknesses lie." Hayes turned, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Weaknesses? Thorn, we're talking about the end of the human race. We don't have time for scientific curiosity." "But Admiral," Lena Petrova interjected, her voice steady, "Dr. Thorn's right. A blind attack is useless. We need to understand the enemy before we can hope to defeat it. We need to learn their biology, find an exploitable weakness." A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines. The tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of fear and uncertainty. Ares could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on him, the burden of their hope and their fear. "We study their biology," Ares stated, his voice resonating with a conviction that surprised even himself. "We find a chink in their armor. That's our only hope." A murmur of dissent rippled through the assembled officers. Many were hardened soldiers, accustomed to direct action, unwilling to accept the idea of a protracted study while the Obsidian Tide advanced inexorably. "We'll need a team," Ares continued, ignoring the murmurs, his gaze firm. "A daring expedition to a partially destroyed planet on the edge of the tide's advance. We need samples, data, anything that will help us understand the enemy." Hayes stared at him, his expression unreadable.